You're listening to another Ambitious Entrepreneur Network.com podcast, the voice for entrepreneurs and small business. Now, onto the show.
You're listening to the award-winning podcast, The Ambitious Entrepreneur Show, featuring business leaders to help you navigate a constantly changing marketplace. Want to become known as a trusted authority while building a thriving business you love? The Ambitious Entrepreneur Show will show you how. Here's your host, Anne-Marie Cross.
And welcome to another episode of the Ambitious Entrepreneur Show, brought to you by the Influence Alliance, the business building community for coaches and consultants who want to build a sustainable and scalable business they love. And I'm your host, Anne-Marie Cross. Now, my guest today says being valued by a few for who you are is worth far more than being recognized by thousands for your accomplishment. And joining me on today's show is Dr. Paul White. Now, Paul, he is a psychologist. He's an author, an international speaker, leadership trainer, and a researcher. And he helps make work relationships work, teaching leaders and employees how to communicate authentic appreciation and how to survive toxic workplaces. Now, on today's show, Paul's going to share the difference between recognition and appreciation and the common misunderstandings that leaders have about appreciation. He's also going to share how to begin communicating appreciation in the ways your team members truly want, as well as what remote employees need and the practical steps to encourage and to support them. So welcome to the show.
Thank you, Anne-Marie. I'm glad to be with you.
So tell us a little bit about appreciation. What does that mean to you?
Well, appreciation means different things in different settings. So you can have assets that appreciate and so forth. But in this context, we're talking about communicating how you value someone in this context with people that you work with. The problem is when people hear the word appreciation, often they automatically sort of go to employee recognition, because so many people know about that, because about 95% of all companies have some form of employee recognition. And not only that, it goes from recognition to generally words, or maybe, going up in front of a large group, which a lot of people don't like. We actually found about 40% of employees don't want to go up front of a large group. So we try to help differentiate between employee recognition and what we would call authentic appreciation, because we're not just about helping people sort of go through the motions, but really to be able to communicate in a genuine way.
Yeah. Now, tell us a little bit of a background, because one of the things that really stood out to me when your team approached me and said, look, we would love for you to get Paul on the show was Gary Chapman's The 5 Love Languages. And it's a book that I know is being published, and many people have that book on their bookshelves. But very much the principles that you're sharing and will be sharing today kind of really found on that too. So tell us a little bit about that background, so people that may not have heard about that, the 5 love languages, can get a bit of context.
Yeah, so the 5 love languages, which Dr. Chapman wrote, it's sold 18 million copies. It's in 50 languages. It's a great book. And I was working with family-owned businesses in consulting in dealing with the relational issues of working together and passing across generations, and came a situation where the father and son just were not connecting. The father thought the son was doing fine. The son said, this is never going to work. I can never hear anything, that I'm pleasing my dad. And it seemed like they were missing each other. So I actually pursued Dr. Chapman for over a year and finally had the opportunity to meet with him, pitch the idea. And so started doing research and developed an online assessment, which we've now developed and had over 275,000 people take. And then wrote the book together, applying the 5 love languages to work, called The 5 Languages of Appreciation in the Workplace. And been fortunate that that's done well. It's sold 500,000 copies. And so we're pleased with that, and continue to sort of spread the news about how to communicate authentic appreciation to people across various workplaces.
Yeah, I would imagine that once someone takes that assessment, they understand their own appreciation language. If that is that the term that you use,
Yeah.
the appreciation language,
Yeah.
as well as the appreciation language of those, even in your family members, but also your team, you really can become far more impactful in their lives. Because often, answer me this, do you find that when people have a specific appreciation language, we can often assume that others are the same, therefore we lead with that? Is that something that you've seen happen?
Yeah, actually, what we do is we encourage teams to take the assessment so that they each identify their primary way of being shown appreciation, their secondary one, because that can be helpful, the one
Yes.
that doesn't matter to them, because that's sort of your blind spot. It's the one you don't think about. And then be able to develop a group chart to learn about that, as well as the specific actions within the language, because those vary as well. So it's really it's helpful. It's interesting to find out your own, but what's really is practically helpful is to find out how somebody else wants to be shown appreciation, because we don't want people to waste their time and energy doing things that they think is helpful and it doesn't really hit the mark, and it just sort of falls by the wayside.
Yeah, absolutely. So you mentioned that often leaders, they have a misunderstanding when it does come to recognition, appreciation. You've kind of hinted to that, but what are some of the misunderstandings that you can share today so that we can be more mindful about that in our workplaces?
Sure. So, first of all, is that appreciation and recognition are different. And the way that we frame that is recognition really is about performance, that we recognize and even reward people who meet their goals and do, above and beyond. Whereas appreciation, we really feel, is about the person, that it's not just about performance, because our employees are people, and we have lives, and we have personality, and not all of that is directly related to performance. And one of the things we know is that even high performers sort of resent just being recognized for performance all the time, because we have the innate sense that I have some value, and I may not be the star, but I still bring things to the group and the team. I mean, it could be as much as a nice smile and a funny laugh and a good sense of humor that just sort of lightens things up. It doesn't increase performance, but it makes for a better environment. And so that's one misconception. And the other is that it's all the leader's responsibility, that supervisors and managers are supposed to do this. While that's helpful, we found that people want to hear that they're valued and appreciated by their peers as well. And so our training really focuses on both training the leader as well as the team members, so that it spreads, sort of the responsibility and the opportunity. It's not according to the organizational chart, because you can appreciate somebody from a different department, maybe IT, they helped you solve a problem, or somebody from facilities helped fix your chair or whatever. So it really makes it a person-to-person kind of thing rather than an organizational activity.
Yes. I know some leaders, what they'll often do is they'll hear something, they'll think, yeah, it sounds really good, but it's not until perhaps differences that they can appreciate, well, when this was applied within the workplace, that they think, well, maybe this is something that we need to do. So maybe reflect, were there some examples that you can share now that once teams were able to appreciate the recognition and the appreciation language of people in their team, what were some of the differences that they started to notice as that team?
Well, first of all, another misconception that relates to that is that most leaders, they hear appreciation and say, yeah, it'd be good, and yeah, we want people to be happy. The goal isn't for people to be happy. Yeah, that's nice if that happens, but really we use appreciation to help make the organization function better. It's sort of like oil in a machine that helps things move, less friction, less sparking and conflict. And we have lots of research in our book. We have over 50 research citations on the benefits as far as lower staff turnover, greater profitability and productivity, increased customer satisfaction, less conflict. Managers themselves like their work better when their team members feel valued. So there's a lot of benefits that way. And one group that I was just communicating with, that they've used our materials for a few years now, is actually a mining company in the mountainous areas of the U.S. And, these are sort of tough guy kind of workers. I mean, they're cement truck drivers and they're miners and so forth. And we thought, this is not sort of our star group that we would pick, but they love it, and they have incorporated it into where we have symbols for each language, and they like to get a sticker to put on their hard hat of their language, and they've actually incorporated it into their onboarding process, and they just feel like it's really improved the morale and the positive nature of the environment for them, and it's really a joy to me to hear that kind of report, especially from that kind of work setting.
Yeah, amazing. And it's interesting. It so is. I know before we went live, I was saying that my daughter loves the 5 love languages, and she will often, what's your love language? But isn't that interesting that here we have these miners that actually have what appreciation language they are, and they have that on their helmet. So, I mean, anyone can really apply this within their workplace. Now, we're going to talk about how to begin communicating appreciation in ways that your team members truly want. I'd love to find out, what are the appreciation languages? Are there 5? Do they model across what Gary Chapman has said in the love languages?
Yeah, they're the same in name as the love languages, but they differ in how they're applied, right? So they're words of affirmation,
Yes.
quality time, acts of service, tangible gifts, and even physical touch. And that's always a fun one to talk about, and lots of interest around it. But that different people have different ways that they value being shown appreciation. And we found with over 250,000 people having taken it, we've got some good data. What's interesting is that most people think about words first, say thanks to people or give them a compliment. And that is the largest group. About 46% of employees like words, but that's less than half of all employees. So if you just use words, you're missing half of your employees. And so quality time can either be individual time with their supervisor or manager, but that's less and less true with younger employees. They really like to hang out with their colleagues and go do things with their peers. And so it's not so much just, to a direct report kind of relationship. And that's 26% of the population. Acts of service is 22%. So about 1 out of every 5 employees. And that's not rescuing a low performing colleague, but it's more, what can you do to help a little bit make their day or week go better? And the best context of that is when they're on a time limited project and they're pressing to get it done. What's something that you can do to help out, whether that's sort of run interference for them, don't take their calls or whatever, or maybe do a little bit of their daily work so they can focus on the project. And that can really make a difference, because for some people, words are cheap, or that's their perception, right? And so it has to be in action.
Yeah.
Tangible gifts are not, bonuses, raises. That's sort of in the employee-employer contract, but it's more small things that show that you're getting to know your colleagues at a personal level. It could be their favorite kind of coffee, a snack that they really enjoy, maybe a magazine about their favorite sports team, or shooting them even an email and a link to an article of something of interest to them. It's just about, what do they like? Now, what's interesting is, while employee recognition programs focus a lot on tangible rewards, only 6% of the workforce say that tangible gifts is their primary way of being shown appreciation. Because I've had people say, if I don't hear anything, if nobody checks in and sees how I'm doing, I never get any help when I need just a little bit, and you give me a gift, it feels pretty superficial.
Yes.
So, and then the last one is physical touch, which is, a lot of people get weirded about that. It's not the weird hug that somebody gives you or whatever. I don't know the Australian culture very well, but, we deal with Europeans and Latin Americans, and some of them are sort of huggy, but it's really spontaneous celebration. It's a high five, when you complete a project. It's a fist bump when you solve a problem, maybe a congratulatory handshake when you make a sale and that kind of stuff. So, and it's less than 1%, but it's there because we really didn't want to advocate a touchless society, because appropriate touch can be very meaningful in the right relationship. And also it happens. And so let's just explain what it is, and let people sort of identify whether they like it or not.
Yeah, and I would imagine that that last one, the physical touch, there would have to be some real, key parameters around that. I know here in Australia, there's been, in our news, inappropriate things. Let's just say that happening in the
Sure.
workplace, and sometimes you think, man, do we really need to tell people that is inappropriate?
Exactly.
I mean, that would have been quite difficult if you think that, and we're going to talk about this, what remote employees need now, because for some, spending quality time, words of
Hmm.
affirmation, touch, that high five, being able to kind of be in that
Right.
environment, that was all really stripped away. So to
Hmm.
imagine that has impacted many workplaces around the world.
Absolutely. And in fact, we did research both at the beginning of the COVID pandemic here in the US, which was around in March, and then in the fall, and then just completed some to look at what differences are going on between remote employees and on site employees, and also pre COVID and during COVID. And what's interesting is that it really sort of surprised me. One is that regardless of your setting and pre or during COVID, people's languages pretty much stay the same. That words is still the most frequently chosen, although it comes down a little bit and quality time does go up, which makes sense because people were more isolated. Acts of service was about the same. Tangible gifts was still low. But the difference that we found was that how do you communicate that? What are the actions? And so we actually created a version of our inventory. It's called the Motivating by Appreciation Inventory, that is for remote relationships because the actions differ. So how do you spend quality time with somebody who's offsite, or in another state or country? It has to do with um, being able to connect with them, and not just on Zoom meetings about business, because those go okay. I mean, they're they have their own set of problems. But what we've missed is that personal interaction around, hey, what'd you do this weekend, or did you see the game last night, or how are your kids doing? Because the Zoom calls are all very structured, and so people really want to connect at a personal level about what's going on in their life, and what's going on in your life. And we have to sort of either be proactive and initiate that, because you don't just see them in the break room, right? Or you don't walk by their office. And if you're not proactive, it doesn't happen. And so we encourage people to send somebody a note, an email, chat, whatever, and say, hey, I'd like to catch up with you for a few minutes. When would be a good time? Because often we're reluctant because we don't want to interrupt the other person. And then you set that up, and then you just chat for 5 or 10 minutes. And that's really key, that people are missing that in the remote kind of work relationships.
Yes, yes. It's interesting you should say that, Paul. I went to the first networking face-to-face event last week, and it was some of the younger women that had come from a solicitor or lawyer firm, legal firm, was saying that one of the things that their team did, the leadership did, was I think once a week on a Friday afternoon, 4:30, 4 o'clock, whatever it was, they would all get together, hang out on Zoom and have a glass of wine and bring
Hmm.
families along. And one of the young women there said when they announced it, they thought, "Oh, just ridiculous." She
Right.
said, well, no, I'll go. But she said it was the best thing because it was just people chatting, just being, they kept it small. So there wasn't a lot of noise, but
Right.
just the ability to be able to wind down, chat, how you going, and personal things was so needed. And it wasn't till that happened that they realized how much they'd missed that. It's
Right.
interesting.
That's a great example, because another principle about that is that, again, connecting people at the peer and colleague level is not just the supervisor with their person that reports to them, but helping your team stay connected, because that's where a lot of the support is. They know each other, they've worked together. And so setting up those kinds of group uh, virtual events, and other examples are, people that have sort of a coffee time, they've had game nights, all different kinds of things to facilitate those kinds of just personal interactions.
Yeah, I think it's even more so important, isn't it? Because the whole aspect of what's been happening, the uncertainty there, if we can create some aspects of this, whatever we want to call it, cheese and bicky, whatever, it allows people to unwind and even have the ability to speak. I think creating those spaces where maybe as a leader, you've got to create an environment where you are able to, what you may not do within the workplace normally, but
Right.
your team are individuals too, and their life has probably been impacted. So I think as businesses, leaders of businesses, we need to be mindful of that too. Moving forward, I mean, there's a couple of questions that I do want to ask. If someone's listening and watching today and they are a leader and they'd love to implement that, what is the best way for them to bring that forward with the team so that everyone is empowered to want to do this? And then vice versa too. What if someone is working on a team and thinks, I would love to share this with my leaders in the hope that they will also get this for our team? Can you share
Sure.
some insights in that?
Yeah. So, we have a website. It's appreciationatwork.com. It's the word at, but appreciationatwork.com. That is sort of our mothership, and it has free videos. It has articles, podcasts. This will be on there eventually. And obviously the book, The 5 Languages of Appreciation, it's an easy read, and you can just sort of read it in different sections that you want. We've also developed training resources, both for remote virtual training as well as on-site training that maybe an HR person or just a leader wants to take their team through it. And so, and then the assessment is key, because if you don't sort of find out what's individually important to the person, it's difficult. But I would say the way you start is start with yourself, right? I mean, you sort of get introduced to it, find out about the languages. With the book comes a free code to take the inventory. And so you can sort of see that, how that goes. And then we sell group codes for groups and teams. And then, you can lots of times do sort of a soft intro and say, hey, I've been reading this book, and you sort of have it on your desk or whatever. And just say that, I realize that it's important for us to support one another, encourage one another, show appreciation, and do it in a way that's meaningful. Usually people are quite interested in it. I mean, there are some people that are like, but when you hear that it's about being authentic, about being individual versus sort of just the group application that everybody does the same thing, people find that's interesting. And we're working with Pepsi Global right now. We've worked with DirecTV. We've worked with Caterpillar, ExxonMobil, Apple, all the big companies. But we start small, and we work with a lot of very small companies. That's how we started, and just give the resources to start where you are. And so it's starting with you, maybe introducing to one or two people, and then start to grow it sort of virtually and virally that way.
I think this is, as you mentioned, with the miners being able to have that awareness. I think awareness of ourselves, awareness of team members around us, our peers, it's so vital, and it enables us to be even more influential and impactful, and appreciate them in a way in which, for them, it's like their love language. They really feel appreciated because, and I'm just going to go through all of the different ones again. I've written down the percentages just for people who are just catching the live stream. And of course, go to the website. That is there, appreciationatwork.com. But you were talking about words of affirmation. That was 46%. And quality time, 26%, acts of service, 22%, and then gifts, I think you were saying 6% was gifts.
Correct.
Yep. And physical touch, less than 1%. And we talked about these are obviously the primary, but you said the secondary too. So just talk a little bit. We've got a little bit of time to spend when we're thinking about the secondary. So obviously someone is a secondary, one of those that I've just read out. How important is the secondary?
Well, I would say it's sort of secondarily important in the sense that what the secondary languages do is really they help emphasize. So if it's words and time, so you spend some time together and then you communicate by words, or time and a gift. So it sort of really hits the mark. In some ways, the more important one is the least valued language that we identify, because that's the one that you don't think about because it's not important to you. So it's like, why would I want to spend time or, somebody stops by to spend time with you and you're like, yeah, fine, I got work to do. Catch you later. But for them, it's an important. And so it's, especially for leaders, it helps us identify sort of our blind spot, because you're going to have team members that have that language and you have to learn how to communicate in that way. And so we talk about that. If you're going to truly learn how to lead people, you have to learn how to lead people who are different than you are. Otherwise, you have a bunch of little mini yous following you around, and you may be great and wonderful and talented, but teams need different kinds of people. And that's true in the world of appreciation as well.
Yeah. Now, it's interesting that you said earlier on you get the team to do the assessment, and then I would imagine, and speak a little bit about this, because obviously you've got individual members of the team, so their individual, appreciation language is really important. Do you find that there's something about the team and itself that there's also something there that's built? Like, if you've, and I'm not even sure if I'm asking the question correctly, but you might find that the team in and of itself, together, united, kind of has a lean towards an appreciation.
Right.
Does that occur?
It does occur, but what's interesting is that it's pretty random. I mean, you might think, like, let's say social workers, that they would like to hang out together. It's no different than a group of accountants or whatever. That it's pretty unique to the group. One of the themes, though, is that often maybe the culture of the organization biases towards the languages that they don't like. Like, I just did one for a global team that gifts just really wasn't what they wanted. Well, partly they're a virtual team. It's a little bit more difficult to do gifts that way, but also it's not that people don't want gifts. It's just that they want the other things more, right? It's a relative rating. And so it's not like they're going to give something back, but if you don't, check in with them and see how they're doing, the gift has lesser value. And so I think those are the themes that we see more often.
Yeah, interesting. From the love languages, the gifts for me is the absolute lowest. In fact, I scored nothing. But I tell you what, if someone bought me anything that was Apple, oh my goodness, I would be over the moon. So it's interesting, isn't it?
Yeah.
Yeah, you've got to kind of know around this. Look, this has been such a fascinating conversation. Thank you so much for sharing. And of course, we've just scratched the surface. So please go to the website. We'll mention it again, appreciationatwork.com. There are so many resources there, videos. You can catch them on the replay again. Once we finish this live, you'll be able to go back. But there's videos there. You can take the assessment there. You can find the book, get the book. As Paul was saying, if you would love to introduce this to your team and you're not sure how to do that, take the assessment yourself first. Get the book, have it there, and I'm sure once you start talking about that and creating that curiosity and what's possible, you mentioned some incredible benefits of what was occurring in the workplace once people understood their team members' appreciation language. So once again, thank you so very much for coming on the show.
My pleasure.
And how about connecting with you, Paul? All of the details there, appreciationatwork.com. That's the best way.
But you know what I do is, if people want to write me, and I'll send them a sample report so they can see that ahead of time, and just write me at yesdrpaul@gmail.com. So yesdrpaul@gmail, and I'll send both a sample report as well as some other information about our training resources, and they can ask questions or make comments as well. So I'd be glad to get that.
Yeah, fantastic. Well, thanks once again for coming on the show.
My pleasure. Thanks.
So every episode, I'm going to bring one other tip around building your influence. And one of the things I wanted to share today was around two very simple words, which may seem quite insignificant. So these two words are "so that," and it was something that was explained to me by one of my mentors many years ago. So how come these words are so powerful, and how can we use them? Well, how you use them is being able to turn what we might call a very boring feature-focused statement into an outcome-focused statement. And and one that compels your ideal client to want to know more about you and what you can offer them. So let's give it a try with a career coach. Say, this is my old background when I was in career coaching. So I might say something like, well, I help job seekers write an achievement-focused resume. So what? But if I add so that resume can stand out from the hundreds of other applications, I bet you if you are looking to stand out amongst the hundreds of other applications, that's something that you would certainly pique your interest. Maybe you might say something like, well, the resumes that I write for clients stands out from hundreds of applications so that they get invited to the elusive interview for their dream jobs. Now, doesn't that sound far more compelling? And it's tied very much to what we know that job seekers and people looking to secure that elusive interview would certainly be looking for. So give that a go. Say a statement and then add so that, and add your outcome focused statement. Let me know how you go. And as always, have an incredible week. Bye for now.
This podcast is brought to you by theinfluencealliance.com. Want to influence real change with your message by becoming known as a trusted authority in your industry while building a sustainable and scalable business you love? Find out how by accessing our free podcast series at www.theinfluencealliance.com/podcast series. That's theinfluencealliance.com/podcast series.